The arguments by Callicles represent serious challenges to the conventional ethics and to the practice of philosophy. It's no surprise that Socrates is keen to refute them. He begins in his usual unassuming way by appearing simply to ask for a simple point of clarification. But this becomes the point that Callicles ultimately finds difficult to deal with. Socrates asks, quote, "Am I mistaken in thinking that according to you, right consists in the stronger taking the property of the weaker by force, and the better ruling the worse, and the nobler having more than the person of lesser worth?" Callicles affirms that this was his meaning. Socrates then prods him for an account of what specifically he means by better and stronger in this context. Callicles attempts a series of definitions, each of which Socrates takes up for refutation. At first, Callicles maintains that the better and the stronger are synonymous. But Socrates shows that this can't be the case, since a group of people, although weaker individually, are collectively stronger than even very strong people as individuals. In a democracy, it's the majority that makes the laws, and thus the many rule over the few. On this view, equality would be supported by natural law, since the majority who advocate it are the stronger. So in this case, the many are the stronger, and it would follow then that, according to Callicles' claim, they would also de facto be the better, since the two terms were allegedly synonymous. But Callicles rejects this conclusion, which seems to follow from his position. He polemically asks, quote, "Do you take me to mean that if you sweep together a heap of slaves and riffraff, useful only perhaps for their brawn, and they say this or that, what they say is to have the force of law?" Thus Callicles grants that the slaves might be more powerful than he is with respect to physical strength, but they're certainly not to be counted as among the better people. Upon further questioning by Socrates, Callicles shifts his definition of the better to mean the more intelligent or the wiser. He states his revised thesis as follows, quote, "My belief is that natural right consists in the better and wiser man ruling over his inferiors and having the lion's share." Socrates then goes about refuting this idea. He does this with a series of examples about people who are intelligent or have expert knowledge in different areas. A doctor knows about questions of nutrition, and so it would follow that he is wiser than everyone else in this regard, and according to Callicles' view, he should have the right to the lion's share, which in this case would mean the lion's share of the food and drink, according to Socrates. By analogy, the weaver has more knowledge than other people about making clothes, and so it would seem to follow that he should have more and finer clothes than other people. So also, a shoemaker, due to his special knowledge, should have more and better shoes than everyone else. Finally, a farmer, by virtue of his knowledge of how to grow crops, should have more seed than other people. Callicles vehemently rejects these analogies, and again insists that this is not what he's talking about when he refers to the stronger being wiser or more intelligent than the others. He then shifts the definition once again by claiming that the stronger are the more courageous. He states his new thesis as follows, quote, "I mean people with intelligence to know how the city's affairs should be handled, and not intelligence but courage. People who have the ability to carry out their ideas and who will not give up from faintness of heart," end quote. This would seem a particularly striking claim to an Athenian audience. It will be recalled that it was one of the points emphasized by Pericles in his funeral oration that it was an important element of Athenian democracy that any person, that is, any free adult male, could be elected by lot to serve in the council or on a jury at a given time, and thus everyone had a general knowledge about politics. For Pericles, this was clearly a virtue and an advantage of the political system in Athens, in contrast to that of Sparta and other states, where the power rested solely in the hands of a ruling elite. Callicles' view is that there are some people who, by nature, are more intelligent with regard to matters of state, and they should be the ones to rule. It should be noted that while Socrates is interested in refuting the might makes right argument in the Republic, he in fact develops a view of the state that in some ways resembles the elitist view of Callicles. Plato was generally a critic of Athenian democracy, which put to death his beloved teacher. In the Republic, He has Socrates sketch the outline of a theoretical state in which there's a ruling elite of guardians who have had special training in accordance with their nature. Among these rulers would be the philosopher kings, who are the wisest and thus the most suited to rule. However, the key issue at stake between Socrates and Callicles is whether there is something called natural law, which gives the physically stronger the right to oppress the weaker. As we've seen from some of our other texts, such as Thucydides, this is very much an issue of debate in the Greek world. As Callicles frames it, the question was to what degree human convention was in line with the so-called natural law. In the midst of the relativity of custom, this idea of a natural law can seem appealing. However, it's not difficult to show that the kind of behavior that Callicles advocates radically contradicts our basic intuitions of right and wrong. Here again, there arises what we would call the should. We see certain aspects of the world that are not right, and we say that they should be different. Likewise, when we see a strong person bullying a weaker one, or a dictatorship cowing its population with intimidation, our intuitions say that this should not be the case. The question is, where does this should come from that stands in opposition to the real world? Obviously, it comes from our own minds. It's a thought or an idea about what justice and morality amount to. And even the most cynical relativists have such intuitions which they can't deny. Our ideas about these things might differ in their details, but most of us feel strongly about such things such as bullying and intimidation. In cases like this and others, the human mind sets an idea about justice and fairness in contrast to the real world and finds the latter wanting. Our moral sense is thus grounded in this kind of an idea. Socrates was an idealist, that is, an advocate of the philosophical doctrine that it is ideas that are the most real. This is a good example of this view. In the cases of ethics, our moral ideas seem more real and valuable than the actual morally fallible behavior of people in the world. It is the ideas that are enduring.